This is House Planning Help episode 352. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build or retrofit. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, I'll be chatting to Wookey and also Rob Leedham, both of whom have retrofitted their homes. And I suppose this isn't a classic case study episode. It's more about investigating how they've supported each other, how a local retrofit network has developed over time, meetups, spreading information. And I thought this works nicely really with our resource today, the Association for Environment Conscious Building, because for a few reasons. Firstly, this is where I met Wookey. It was Alan Budden from Eco Design Consultants who introduced me at the last conference. And then another reason is that the AECB themselves had local meetups. I know I was part of a local group, but they take a lot of energy to keep going and to make good. So I think they morph a little bit over time. And then the AECB is also just on top of retrofit, some great training, lots of great information over the years. So that makes them a very good resource for today. We'll put that into the show notes. So we're in Cambridge for this episode, which is a lovely part of England. And I was chatting to Mark Brinkley, author of the House Builder's Bible, in a recent episode when he brought up neighbourhood retrofit. And this is when I got a nudge, really, a reminder. Oh yeah, I never followed up on Wookey and finding out how he's supporting and encouraging the local retrofit movement in Cambridge. The plan is this. We're going to get some background on Wookey's retrofit and then pop over to Rob's house. Before we get going, this is a great example of how to save money if you're prepared to invest time, the DIY approach. And Wookey is clearly someone who likes to take things into his own hands. He's a problem solver, he loves getting practical, and maybe you can see yourself in him. You've got these traits too. I can imagine this is really, really useful for a local meetup as well. So I started by asking Wookey how he got into retrofit.
Well, so we arrived, having bought our nice new house in Cambridge at enormous expense, which looked quite tidy, much tidier than the old previous one, which had been an old lady's knackered house. But then it was January, and it was jolly cold, actually, and drafty. And you go, oh, it looks nice. It had been rented out for 10 years, somebody had gone to the old people's home sort of thing. So we thought, we're going to have to do some work, aren't we? How annoying. So we took our nice new, relatively tidy-looking house apart and have ruined it for about a decade. It's just starting to get some bits actually painted and finished again. We started off insulating the loft and airtighting things and buying a new green building store door that wasn't terrible with a massive gap around the outside and so on, and then progressed to wall insulation, internal wall insulation, external wall insulation. The boiler was like an ancient ideal Mexico in the garage, which would obviously do another 30 years quite happily, but was horrible. It was using 6 kilowatt hours a day just to run its pilot light. It was shocking. The garage was quite warm. Uninsulated pipes come across a sort of asphalt roof, the roof felt. So we got rid of all that and put a proper boiler in. Sadly, not a heat pump, which has barely been used, of course, for 15 years and is now about to get replaced with some proper heating. So, yeah, it was very much circumstance, really. We just went, this really isn't quite as good as it looks. Let's do this properly.
Going into this, what skills did you have?
So this was the second house. So the first house, needed plumbing and heating and insulation and everything. But I didn't know much about building physics then. So we stuck insulated plasterboard on the walls and did a standard combi boiler and didn't know much about air tightness. Didn't bother doing the bit between the floors. We just did each room. So I learnt quite a lot from having done it mediocrely once, going, right, this time we're doing things properly. Now I understand how these things are supposed to. So that was pretty much reading the internet. So the Green Building Forum and the Navitron forums were the places where I learnt everything. I've got an engineering degree, so I have an engineering mentality, even though I'm a software engineer. I'm in Cambridge because I went to the university and failed to leave, like a lot of people. We're still here. It's quite a nice town. Long way from the mountains, but apart from that, it's excellent. So, that gives you a certain confidence. How hard could it be? And to be fair, my dealings with tradespeople over the years have been less than inspiring. The few times you go, no, I'll give the car to the garage and let them do it, it comes back wrong. You go, no, I'm good. I find I do a better job if I do it myself. It takes forever, but you get what you want, and it's you know what the quality is.
So that's quite interesting, bringing it into your own sphere where you can control things. So I imagine you're really good at researching different areas and getting down to what is important. So are there any issues that came up along the way that you had to sort out? Can you give us an example of how you went about it?
The MVHR, I guess, is quite a good example. You know, that's a classic thing where normally you just ask somebody to do you a design. It costs $5,000 and they come in and do it for you, right? But actually, the principles aren't very complicated. You know, the airspeed in the pipe needs to be less than whatever it is, 2 meters a second, otherwise it will make a noise. Given a certain amount of volume, you need to shift a certain amount of air, so the pipe needs to be a certain size. That's for the classic, steel spiral pipe, for example. I just sat down and wrote a spreadsheet going, it's Navier-Stokes equation. You discover in this process that this horrible bit of physics where between turbulent flow and non-turbulent flow that nobody knows. It's magic. And you go, really? I'm amazed. But anyway, so you just avoid that zone because it's bad. So, it's not very complicated if you can work a spreadsheet. I just did the sums. And then and a mate emailed me while I was on holiday somewhere saying, there's some MVHR units going on eBay for £500 because they've fitted them on a building site, realised the wrong thing and take them out again 2 days later. So the wife gets a phone call from Austria going, go and get one of these things on eBay. So you get a unit for £500 and it costs about £700 in pipe. And, 12 days in the cupboard and the loft fitting pipes, which is very tedious. I did spend all of one Christmas in the cupboard cutting those stupid spiral pipes. So I would recommend to everybody, don't do it that way. People recommend it, but honestly, I think the single pipes, they're manifold, and it's just like every room is just one pipe or 2 pipes. Big rooms need 2 pipes, everywhere else needs 1 pipe, and it's manifold. It's a lot easier to fit. I don't think it's any less efficient. So for DIY, it's a little bit more expensive. So unless you're absolutely trying to save the pennies, you'll find that a lot less aggravating.
But expense is something that you've done really well with here. And perhaps it's sort of mixed with the amount of time that you have put into it. But I'm intrigued with these decisions, for example, the architectural design when you took that into your own hands. So does it just end up that you look at everything and think, what will happen if I do this myself? It'd be interesting if you could paint that line between what does go to someone else and what stays with you.
Yeah, so generally, my assumption is that I can do everything. And it turns out that's true for everything apart from plastering, which is the hardest thing in the world.
It always comes back, plastering. People always say that.
Covering over the slot where there's some wiring is easy, but doing a whole wall is genuinely, it's a proper skill. So yeah, plastering and tiling and rendering are the 3 things I've paid somebody else for. Actually, that's not true. We started off when we did the extension, so we didn't need an architect, but somebody to do the drawings and all that stuff. So we paid a chap £1,500 to draw some drawings, but he didn't really do what I wanted. It was supposed to be green, and he just built a square brick, the cheapest possible extension you could have. And you go, no. So I went, I can do a better job than this. I should just have started that way myself, really. So what I got out of him basically was a measured plot. He was quite good at that. So, I just did all the drawings myself in the end. And because I'm a free software person, I have to use open source stuff. And open source CAD back in 2012 wasn't very good. So I had to use 2D CAD, which was annoying for a triangular building. But anyway, everything came out all right, even the windows fitted. But there was a measure 6 times job before you ordered the windows, because it's all on you. I measured the windows, I'm paying for the windows. If they don't fit when they arrive, it's my fault. I don't get to blame anybody else.
We jumped around a little bit, so let's just backtrack on the actual building. What is the build-up? What shape is it? What was the retrofit plan?
It's a fairly straightforward 7 by 8 metre square 1960s detached house with a separate garage. So the extension was basically filling in the bit between the house and the garage and tarting that up with a sunroom on the front. So we started off with basic insulation, and then once we'd done the core stuff, then we did the extension for 3 years. So we got builders to do that, to be fair. I didn't do all the brickwork and things, so that was just a time issue, We both had jobs, but we did all the kind of internal work and fitting the underfloor heating and quite a lot of the insulating and all the airtightness.
When have you had time to do this then? You've clearly got a job there's a lot of thinking in that, full stop. So when you move on from there, you've got a lot on your plate. Yeah,
it's weekends really. So yes, there's a lot of weekends when we could have gone cycle touring instead of, chipping bits of stuff off the wall, that's definitely a trend. So we did make a rule fairly early on, like at least one weekend a month we're going to do something, because this goes on forever, right? So you need to kind of explicitly go, stop doing DIY, do something else for a bit. But yeah, we haven't got any kids, that helps. And I quite like it.
And one really interesting aspect of this is that we're in an area where quite a few retrofits have taken place and are taking place. So when did this come onto the radar when you were doing your own project?
Yeah, so it started off, as I say, I used the Green Building Forum a lot, and some people were in and around Cambridge, and if you hang out in a forum long enough, you sort of become mates with the people, even though you've never met them. So we thought, let's go to the pub. So a few of us arranged to meet in a pub near the station because people were coming from nearby. So we did that quarterly, maybe, rather irregularly for a few years. And then that kind of faded off. Later on, it's restarted as more local. So, I found people at work. I work at a nice, reasonably well-paid office, so the people there can actually afford to do their own houses. But, most of them either haven't thought about it, or if they have thought about it, they don't know where to start. So there's quite a lot of people in Cambridge who are interested, at least vaguely, being able to just talk to somebody on a non-commercial basis about, what have you done? Now, we already have various institutions in Cambridge, like the Open Eco Homes thing, and I went to those obviously in the early days, sort of 2010. We went round and looked at various other people's, what they'd done, which again is very helpful in understanding. And you can actually ask them, what works, what didn't. So yeah, it's just grown over time, and you meet people at various events and around, and basically everybody I meet, I go, "Have you fixed your house yet?"
That's really interesting that you're encouraging as well. So what do they respond to that? What the range of response?
Usually the answer is no, obviously. But yeah, quite a lot of people generally go, "Yeah, but I should." So they get that.
Do you get buy-in as well on what you have done here and the full measure? Because it is quite a complicated subject. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Maybe not for you as an engineer, but I have certainly tried to convince a few of my friends, and I'm not sure they quite get it.
A surprisingly large fraction of the people I meet think, yes, that is a good idea and I should definitely find out about it. A very small fraction of them want to do it as DIY or take ownership. They don't really want to learn about the whole thing. They just want somebody to do it. And there's a terrible shortage. There aren't enough people around here at the moment. I know several people who've been quite keen and have tried to get quotes and struggled, or been told that, we can come and get to you in 2.5 years' time.
Can you paint a picture of who this DIY person is? How many skills do you really need to have? We don't want poor retrofit taking place. We know there's a certain amount of information that's important and a certain amount of practical skill. So who is that DIY retrofitter?
Yeah, I guess I got a fair amount of practical skill just acquired. I've always fixed my own cars. That was kind of where it started. And electronics, and then buildings. Buildings are quite simple, really, in comparison to cars and electronics. It's often fairly basic stuff. So it's mostly a matter of understanding building physics, so you actually know what you're trying to do to get to the bottom of something. That's a problem I find on the internet. There's an awful lot of advice, but it doesn't really explain why most of the time. You've got to go to better resources. Like the Green Building Store did a great job of publishing the details of their Denby Dale passive house stuff. I basically stole all those details for my extension and went, right, I'll do it like that. It'll be fine. In principle, a timber frame building might have been better, but I already got a brick building, and adding totally different constructions, a bit of a pain. It's easier to do it if it's kind of the same stuff. So having made that decision, you go, right, well, we might as well just copy all their details. That looks good. Some stuff I've just made up, like a fiberglass I-beam between the inner leaf and the outer leaf to try and keep the thermal bridging down. And you kind of think, is my building inspector going to complain about this? But it turns out building inspectors don't know anything about this stuff. So they only care about things they understand, like foundations and, wall tie, roof structure. So it was pretty good, actually. He basically ignored anything he didn't understand, and I had no trouble at all with, uncertified LED lights. I made my own lights up, and weird bits of construction and those sorts of details.
Few people, in my experience, are actually that interested in copying proven techniques, details, and all the rest of it. So I think that's they always want a bespoke solution in a way, and that, to me, is why we keep going round and round in
circles and architects, you can end up paying a lot of money when you might have been happy with just build me a box with tried and tested ways of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, especially detailing. It was interesting because I did all the design for this extension and it's weird and triangular. It's the same as a whole house, right? You've still got doors and windows and roofs and walls and floors and corners and there's a whole load of junctions, and you have to think for every one of them, oh, where's the airtightness layer going to go and how's this attaching to other things, and if I don't think about it, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to rely on my builder to do it right. To be fair, we had quite a good, relatively green-minded builder. There is one in Cambridge, but still. So yeah, there's always some stuff which is particular to this building, but yeah, I did my best to, again, reading on forums, people suggest stuff, right? If someone's done it before and it works, that's usually a good detail.
Did anything come up too late? So I'm sure you would have got there eventually, but you'd perhaps done something already and then discovered something new.
Yeah, I mean, ordering's always difficult. Trying to do things in advance, like, the very first thing we did, or second thing we did, was fitted a new front door, and we made it 50 mil off the floor on the assumption that this is a concrete slab and we're going to have to put some insulation down. We probably don't want to dig it all up, really. So we did that, and I think that's going to work out, actually. 13 years later, the floor insulation's going in and the door's already at the right height, so, results. But equally, we did the extension and had to put the manifold somewhere, and now we're thinking about the rest of the house. Actually, I don't think it's put in the right place, and that's probably going to have to move. So I do emphasise the whole building plan to people as much as possible, even though it's kind of off-putting because they want to start this thing, and now you're turning it into this massive project. You've got to think about everything before you can start, which is a problem because sometimes it means people just don't, ever, or at least not for a decade. So there's a bit of a problem. But it really does matter. You can waste a lot of time and money doing things twice if you're not careful.
Right, I've got a couple of questions on this. First of all, if I had come to you at the beginning and said that to you, would you have got one?
You mean gone to somebody else? Well, I tried to make my own whole building plan.
No, that wasn't the question.
Yeah, now that retrofit coordinators exist and all that sort of past 2035 approach, I think that's a good approach. I'm not sure.
What that had was inbuilt knowledge in that step, because that's the buy-in that we want to get. I'm thinking of friends who have done maybe just replace some glazing, but without a whole house approach, like you're saying, you're never going to get the glazing.
Move the windows into the insulation layer and all that stuff. Yeah, I guess the one major thing that did get changed during this process was I started off doing internal wall insulation, mostly because it was easy to DIY, and I was aiming for like AECB carbon light grade, 50 kilowatt hours per metre squared kind of thing. And then over time, I got more enthusiastic, basically, and thought, you know what, actually, do PHPP some. I put PHPP off for a long time because it's a pain in the arse. It took a month from a standing start, even though I kind of understand the principles. But, it's just, if you've not done it before, it's hard. But eventually you do something, actually, we could get to NFIT, or at least pretty close on this house. So they ended up doing the second half of the house EWI, mostly because the kitchen, the bathroom and the stairs are all on that wall, and you can't really do it on the inside sensibly. So you have to go outside. So honestly, it would have been better to do the whole damn thing on the outside as one EWI. That would have just been technically better. Okay, it would have cost more, basically. That's the only reason not to. So that changed over time. Where I was trying to get to improved over a decade. And that meant that we ended up changing the windows on the south side, which they were 20 years old, but they weren't terrible. So we were going to keep those. But when it came to buying windows and delivery costs and so on, you work out, we might as well do the whole damn house. So annoyingly, the nice reveals you've already done and tarted up get to be destroyed. So that's the only thing we've ended up damaging previous work and having to do it again.
It sounds like you might have done some major things differently if you were starting with this knowledge that you've gained over the years now.
Yeah, as I say, I would have basically gone for a proper NFIT retrofit. We are living in the house, so the digging up the floor part is always a bit of a commitment that you probably want to avoid, and you don't have to. But yeah,
how has that been then? Because that is a key part of retrofit. You've chosen not to move out. I imagine it's been okay because of the length of time, but there is disruption in the time.
Yeah, so basically you're doing things a room at a time. The IWR, you just do a bit and you do a bit and you do a bit. And so you are moving furniture around. And over time, you collect more stuff and the moving furniture. So like this room, I was going to put underfloor heating in, was the original plan. So I took the radiator off the wall, and then several years later went, actually, I've put so much crap in this room. That's not going to happen, is it? I'll put the radiator back, which is kind of irritating. I did at least leave a T-piece in the plumbing, so it wasn't too difficult. But yeah, working around the things. It is a bit of a pain. Dust, I think, is actually the biggest problem. Once you put your MVHR in, you don't really want to go crazy with an angle grinder anymore. And we did so I cut out the reveals, which is excellent from a thermal bridging improvement point of view, but it does make a hell of a mess. Because indoor angle grinding is just not something you really want to do in a house you're actually living in if you can help it. We had to put a little sort of shower curtain round the lounge window in one place where it was actually nominally a finished room with furniture in it and things. So yeah, I have a very tolerant wife. She would like to point out that I am extremely tolerant of all that aggravation.
Very good. I think we need to underline that. And what about challenges then? What do you think has been the biggest challenge on the project?
I guess it uses up a lot of time, I think is possibly the most significant thing, after a decade of weekends doing DIY.
But you've enjoyed it?
Generally, yeah, I do like the process. There are other occasions when you think, I should possibly have done a bit less of this and a bit more of some other things. But yeah, I do like the problem solving. You've got to design something, you've got to actually do it. And, it's nice when you've finished and it's come out well. You do get quality work if you do it yourself. The real problem with tradespeople is that everything's time-based. How many hours is this going to take, right? So they won't necessarily thread the plumbing and the wiring in the right place. They'll do it wherever they can get at in half an hour rather than doing it properly, which is literally going to take 10 times as long. I think that's the main advantage of doing things yourself, is you get those little details right.
And you really understand the building, don't you? You know what has happened to it.
Yes, you get to find out where all your cables go and where the leaks are. It took us a surprisingly long time to find some of the holes from the airtightness point of view. The kitchen was always freezing, and we didn't know what. And it was embarrassingly 9 years before we realised that the pipe from the dishwasher was just shoved into an old sink pipe. So there was no J-trap with water in it. So there was just a gale blowing in through the hole. And you go, well, that will explain why it's bloody freezing in this corner. And in fact, where the water pipe to the meter came in, even though it's coming out of the ground, was a gale blowing through that as well, which we didn't discover until we did some floor insulation. I don't understand where the air's coming in. It's like coming in through the dirt somehow. Magic.
Have you done any analysis since of the house of how you feel it's performing, both thermally, air quality and so forth?
Yeah, so once we finished the basic insulation shell, which we did just before lockdown, so the EWI was done, then you really notice that basically now it's all warm, your kitchen isn't freezing anymore, didn't really need any heating, and we were stuck here the whole time. And you've got triple glazing, so it's very quiet. I mean, it's a fairly quiet area anyway, but now it's super quiet in here. When we did the MVHR, we also really noticed, because the wife used to suffer from dust mite allergy a bit, and that just went away. So, yeah, you really do notice the quality of the building. And as other people have said this, when you go and rent somewhere to stay, you go, it's all cold and drafty in these rented cottages. It's not like my nice house at home. So you get quite picky about buildings once you've tried living in one that's actually good. So, yeah, and we did finally do an airtightness test. We didn't do one at the beginning, so I don't know how terrible this house was. I couldn't quite bring myself to spend 300 quid just to find out it was really drafty. That was obvious. So it's not quantified, but we've now finally done it. We've got 1.52 air changes per hour, which is, I was hoping to get to 1, but, that's not bad for a 60s cavity wall.
It's surprisingly difficult, isn't it, to get under 1 on a retrofit, which is, I guess, why that marker is often there.
Exactly, without totally replastering all the walls and really going for it, total destruction sort of job.
Now, I think it would be interesting if we widen our interview and head off down the road. So tell me where we're off to first.
So backing onto me is my neighbour Rob Leedham, and he's basically been more or less fitting, not quite his house at the same time I have been. So as we've gone on, we've exchanged quite a lot of notes about fitting. And I've used wood fibre on, he used EPS, and so with various differences. They're nominally identical houses on the same housing estate half a year apart, but actually they're different in various ways because they're all slightly different here. The eaves construction's not the same anywhere, and so on. I've got skeelings, he hasn't. He did his MVHR before I did, so that kind of thing. But we've basically followed a fairly similar path.
Yeah, this is one of the real challenges of retrofit, that it's not as if it's one solution, there we go, give it to everyone, job done. Come on then, let's go.
This is 2 houses down. They're just about to send in their planning permission for a major retrofit to expand, because that's one of the few houses that hasn't been expanded yet.
Well, that's always nice, isn't it, when it needs some work doing to it. It's the right time.
Right. And the guy, I think he was an architect, or something like that. He does know what he's doing. So I think they're planning quite a good retrofit, but they're limited by how much money they've got. So there's a compromise on, making it bigger for the kids and basically how much house they can have. And they've had to scale down their ideas a bit as building prices have gone up.
You're going to have to do the knocking and stuff here.
Hello, Rob.
Good day, Rob.
Hello, Wookey.
Brought Ben round to come and talk to you about improving houses.
You've just come to the right place.
Excellent.
Come in.
Right.
Please.
Rob, can you remember when you first met Wookey?
Oh, I think that was probably about 10 years ago, maybe slightly more
Yeah, we
even.
moved in 2007, so but I guess you were just looking for a bit. You saw some bloke on the roof, I think, fitting hot water. So the first thing I did was solar thermal. So you looked at the back garden and go, who's that bloke on the roof? What is he doing?
Yes, I think Wookey introduced me to solar thermal and we followed him down that route and then solar electric after that.
So did you always plan to do a retrofit here?
I think over time my ideas about what were possible have increased, and over the 23 years that we've been here we've installed one green measure after another. I don't think there's been a master plan. People rarely know they're going to stay somewhere for that length of time, but in retrospect it has worked out that way.
Now, I'm intrigued as well about this working together. Maybe it helped that Wookey was ahead of you a little bit. So what have you got from that relationship? How has it worked out?
I think it's very useful and confirming to identify someone that's explored new ideas and shows that something's possible. We've put solar panels on our roof and we've put external wall insulation on. I've had many conversations with people passing the house about both of those technologies.
And when we've just walked in through the doorway, the first thing I noticed was a fan. So what's the story there?
So we installed mechanical heat recovery ventilation about 10 years ago. And as part of that process, I've been making the house very airtight in order that we don't lose energy through uncontrolled air leakage. And the fans that you saw in the hallway, one of them is a professional air tightness kit, and the other one is a less expensive version intended to be loaned out to people. And the idea of those is that you install them in a door or a window, and when they're on, they allow you to depressurize a house, identify leaks and calculate how leaky the house is. So how much energy is lost through uncontrolled ventilation.
Was that like 5 or 6 years ago or something? Basically, Rob wanted to test his airtightness, find the leaks. So he just made a plank, stuck it in the window, and I went, oh, that's handy. Can I borrow it? So I borrowed it. It's a car radiator found on a plank. I mean, it's really not very fancy. So I borrowed it, and it was really useful for finding leaks. Once you can depressurise your house, you can just walk around and look for all the leaks, and you haven't got some air tightness chap that you had to pay 300 quid to standing there looking at his watch. You've got all day, all week. Makes a huge difference. There's another chap just down the road who's been doing a massive Enerfit project, and he was struggling to get his air tightness, so he borrowed the fan, and the builders found it really useful to be able to try and find the leaks. So we've realised that this is actually a very applicable thing. It doesn't cost very much money. So now the Cambridge retrofit hub is getting going in Cambridge. So I don't know if you're familiar with Cosy Homes Oxford, but they're basically trying to replicate that model in Cambridge so that there is somebody for most people to go to and just get stuff done rather than have to become experts themselves. And they're going, we should have a load of these fans so we can just give them to people and they can start finding where all their holes are.
And Robert, slightly off retrofit topic here, but did I hear that you created your own ground source heat pump?
Yes, that's true. That's something that I kind of drifted into about 3 years ago. I wanted to have a heat pump, started learning about them and wondered about buying one, what different type, and wanted to experiment. And before I knew it, I'd actually ended up building one, and then why not start digging trenches in the garden? And again, I'd like to say there was a grand master plan, but it all seemed to work very well, and it is still installed. It's been going for the past couple of years. So we took out our gas boiler a bit over a year ago, and we fully rely on the heat pump now.
I think we need to have a little wander around. So as we go around, can you just show me anything of interest in either your retrofit or how you're powering the house differently?
Okay. We're in the kitchen at the moment, and in the ceiling there we can see one of the many heat exchanger vents, and that one's taking air out of the house. So warm, moist air, it takes out of the house and passes the energy on to cold, fresh air that comes in into other rooms of the house.
Did you have an air tightness target before you went for whole house ventilation?
I had a target to get under 3. That's the point where it's considered to be efficient to have a heat exchanger. And that's air changes per hour at 50 pascals. We're around 2.1 now.
But there are just so many benefits. I know what you're saying in terms of electricity usage, but then you've got all of the moist air going out the bathrooms, out of the smelly rooms, and yeah, it's just great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an unsung hero, really. I mean, my wife really likes the fresh air in the house, and it just works. Oh, I think that might be on. Is it? Yeah, I can hear it here. There are some bits, because it's the heat pump, as I say, is DIY. Some part of it is inside and some part outside, and so the electronics is inside and the header tank. And there's a little display there that says it's got a coefficient of performance of 4.4 at the moment. So inside we've got that part that calculates the efficiency, and there's a little electric meter, a standard electric meter off-the-shelf thing for measuring how much electricity is used. It's been going for about 2 years and a couple of months, and it's up to 4 megawatt hours of electricity in to provide all of the heating and hot water for those 2 and a bit years.
Yeah, look.
It's raining.
Yes.
Aha!
And the nice thing about ground source heat pumps is they're actually very simple. You know, there's a compressor and an expander and a pump and 2 heat exchangers, and that's basically it. So, which is why, in fact, it's not that hard to build your own.
Yes. So it lives inside this insulated box, so you can probably just hear it at the moment. We're right next to it. I can take the door off and then it will be a bit louder. It is basically, as Wookey says, a fridge. It sounds like a fridge. It's the power of a large American fridge freezer, except the cold side goes under the ground, and there are some pipes that I can show you under this grate.
This is a fine bit of DIY with some EPS insulation and a bit of rock wool on the inside, which basically deadens the noise. It does a remarkably good job of keeping the...
I just can't get over how Rob is your neighbour. He seems like the perfect person to be living next door to you.
We do egg each other on.
I was quite impressed when he said, I built my own heat pump, and you go, oh, there's an idea, maybe I could do that too. And then I thought, actually, that sounds like quite a lot of faffing about, and so I bought one on eBay instead, which was basically similar. But then the wife went, do we have to dig the garden up? Couldn't we just have an air source heat pump like everybody else? So we're currently on a, how much difference is it actually going to make, and which am I going to do? Maybe some cooling in the summer would be nice, so I should have an air-to-air one. So I'm currently surveying the entire possible sphere, trying to decide something.
Isn't that her domain as well? You've got to be careful going into the garden.
Yeah, I mean, if we'd done it right at the beginning when we moved in and it was some bare grass, that would have been fine. But now there's a whole load of veg beds and plants planted and things. The digging up part is significantly less popular.
Because that's one of the challenges, isn't it, that you've got to be really careful about. You don't want your pipes too close together and all the rest of it, and taking too much heat from the ground.
That's true. We have a lot of insulation in this house, so actually we don't need very much heat. That's the key to making heat pumps work easily, shall we say. So I could make this because there was so much insulation that any heat source would work fine. I have to say, I would always tell people, though, that the sensible thing probably isn't to make your own. It's to actually buy an air source heat pump and have someone install it, and they are the sensible choice these days.
Just depends who you are. Just depends who you are.
The other thing that's a little bit interesting about the heat pump approach is Rob just used a trenching tool, so the pipes are only like 0.8 metres down or 0.85 sort of thing. So it's not, didn't have a massive digging project, and it's still pretty messy, but that was probably a sensible compromise in terms of getting it done without spending a fortune. So you say you reckon the whole thing cost a couple of grand basically by the time you finished?
Yeah, probably less than that. I think the most expensive thing by far was hiring the trencher. Yeah. So that was £700 to hire this machine, which was a brilliant machine. I mean, it I felt so powerful pulling this machine behind me with a massive chainsaw in the front of it that went straight into the ground and threw up the earth, half bricks popping out of the ground everywhere. So I went around the garden with the machine, towing the machine behind me over the course of a weekend, and I was left with a load of trenches, each of which was 2/3 of a metre deep, roughly. The whole family joined in, putting the pipes in and joining them up at the manifold. So under the ground there are no connections, it's just plastic pipe buried in various places. So we can still, see the ground has recovered, and we still plan on using it for whatever, home office or a small orchard perhaps. So at the end here we have another inverter. So we have one in the loft which has been there for 12 years, I think, with the original solar panel system that we got about 12 years ago. This is an additional one now that hybrid inverters are available. So this one can connect to a battery and to more solar panels. And we have the space on the garage roof, some more space in the garden, and so I'd like to have more solar panels.
So everything that we've looked at so far here have been renewables and about the generation side. I mean, when you look at Wookey's project, how in depth have you gone with the house?
For the house itself, it's mostly about saving energy, so insulation in various places. So we have 150 millimetres of external wall insulation completely around the house. As Wookey, we have insulation below ground now, down to the footings, to prevent heat escaping from the slab of the house. So when we first moved in, the concrete floor of the house was very cold to the touch. But with the insulation, it's much more comfortable. It's a much more pleasant house now.
Did you take a DIY approach to all of that work, or how did you make it happen?
Yes, it's all DIY. The original solar electric, that was professional, but other than that, it's a DIY journey of discovery.
And how long has it taken you, and are you still on this journey?
I think, as many people, it's depended on the age of my kids as to how much effort has gone in. The kids are a bit older now, so I'm more able to push on with things. We've been here 23 years. I'm still on the journey. Most people would think we've finished by now, but I can still think of things.
Two fascinating retrofit stories. We did plan to move on to Stuart Dyer's house next, but he was on holiday. However, he's left us a message.
Hi Ben, it's Stuart Dyer here. Yeah, just getting back in touch with regards to the retrofit and extension that we did on our 1930s detached property. We carried out quite an extensive retrofit, moved out for a year. We did external wall insulation, triple glazed the property, fitted mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, put in an air source heat pump. Worked quite hard on air tightness as well. I think that was possibly the most difficult thing. And also put in underfloor heating, which works well with the air source heat pump, and insulated quite a lot under the floors. In terms of being in Cambridge, I think there was quite a benefit because there's quite an active retrofit scheme here in Cambridge. So, for example, we have monthly meetups of the Association of Environmentally Conscious Buildings. So that's a great chance to meet with people in the pub, discuss with those who've already done a lot of work, the good things to do and the pitfalls to avoid. Transition Energy Group is quite active in terms of new technologies, new interests and good advice there. And perhaps one of the key ones is Cambridge Carbon Footprint. So they run an open eco homes each year where you can actually visit other people's houses, either sort of new build passive houses or those who've done quite a lot of retrofit work. And they also have a lot of case studies. So that's great in terms of support for the local community who are looking to either build or retrofit. So very quick summary of what we did there. But now that I've done the work myself, it's a chance to give back by talking to people like yourself. So hope that's useful. Thanks. Bye.
And reflecting on this topic and some of the points made in this episode, first of all, the resources, as ever. If we've mentioned something, it will be in the show notes today. Secondly, groups may exist in your area, so you need to go and investigate, or may have morphed a little bit as they tend to over time. And then the other thing that Stuart mentioned just then is that if you've been on this journey, as we like to do on this podcast, we always find people who've been on this journey and see what they've learnt, then that's a great opportunity to give back. But it's just been fascinating to see action on the ground. And I remember when I was talking to Mark Brinkley, he just had all these different stories of, even on his own street, people who had retrofitted, and then there was one guy who powers his whole house from his car, and all of these sorts of things. So I think we better go back to Wookey for the final word for today about the Cambridge meetups that he's involved with.
It's actually now a mix of ACB members and random people who want to retrofit their houses. And it's interesting, when an architect was running it, architects came to the pub a lot. But now that retrofitters are running it, retrofitters come to the pub a lot. So, the idea is to have a mix, but that doesn't always work as well as you'd like. And it's almost impossible to get builders to come to the pub, which would be nice, but, they're probably busy. But yeah, I think that's been quite useful. And we're now doing that every month. Half online, half offline since COVID, which is kind of useful for people who aren't in the middle of Cambridge. It isn't necessarily handy for them to physically come here. So basically everyone you meet who expresses an interest, and you say, well, just come along and ask, tell us what sort of building you've got, and you'll get some slightly random but unbiased advice from whoever happens to be there this week. And I think quite a few people have done that, and some of them have gone on to do major projects. So I think it's working. But we do definitely need more of the I'd like to do this, but I don't really want to learn all about it. I just want somebody, which is what the retrofit people are for. So I hope that's going to grow.
And that is one such link you will find in today's show notes, along with everything else we've mentioned, houseplanninghelp.com/352. We've got a summary of what has gone on, some photos as well, so you can check out Rob and Wookey's projects. And actually, Stuart sent me an article about his own home, so you'll get to be able to explore that too. If you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, you can tackle that in one of two ways, either on social media, we'll provide links, or at the bottom of the show notes, just scroll down, houseplanninghelp.com/352. My call to action is to check out the Hub, and this is the membership community that we run alongside House Planning Help with all sorts of digital resources so you can keep the learning going, whether you're tackling a new build or a retrofit. As we've been talking retrofit today, a couple of things that might be of interest. We've just added in a new Ask the Expert session. So Ez Trezida is on hand every few months to answer questions around building physics and moisture. And he actually has tackled his own retrofit at Fort William, which is stunning transformation of a building, all sorts of lessons learnt there as well. We've got our in-depth video case studies. And again, the one that might be most relevant is Guy Hargreaves' project. We filmed the entire way through his retrofit. So we mentioned Alan earlier from Eco Design Consultants. Well, this was one of his projects, and just fascinating to see this Victorian building being made more comfortable and energy efficient. We've got our live training sessions, courses, the members only forum, and you can chat with me during office hour. Want to find out more? houseplanninghelp.com/join. There we go. We're done for today. Thank you so much for being there. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.